During a pivotal early signing period, Jackson State hits big, and also Texas Southern's class is highlighted by 2 receiving threats. Oh yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music. Play it.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked on HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Do not forget the S on the end. And I want to talk to you guys about Jackson State, because at a pivotal moment, this was a very important early signing day for the Tigers. And we're actually talking about the Tigers all day when you think about it. But this was a very important early signing day for Jackson State. And I feel like they really hit big and they did everything that they needed to do. We're going to take the first segment to break down the talent that was acquired and retained, but then also take the second segment to break down why this was so important, because this was a big deal that they did this at the time they did. But let's get into the talent, like I said. And Esaias Guthrie, to me, is the star of the class. I know some people might not even include him really in the class because technically he transferred or announced his decision to transfer to Jackson State after the early signing day. So I can understand why somebody might not say he was a star strictly based off of timing. I'm all lumping it together. Like, this is a whole period. Those who commit are going to be in this conversation. Those who sign, those who transfer, those who decided not to enter the transfer portal. All of those are going to be part of this conversation. And it's more of a time period for me. It's more of an early signing period that I'm discussing, and not so much just the day specifically. But that's just my way of looking at it. And I detail that as kind of a disclaimer to start off. But when I look at Esaias Guthrie, man, he's a ball hawk. 4 interceptions in his lone year at Delaware State. So he's coming from an HBCU. He's familiar with the culture. All of these things aren't new. And I'm pretty sure this was a conscious decision to go to another HBCU because he had a year, man. He had himself a year as a freshman, and he had a lot of high praise. And one of those players who a lot of times goes to a bigger school. You know, so the fact that he chose an HBCU, I do believe, is purposeful. And also, he chose Jackson State at a time when Jackson State had a lot of, question marks. But there I go. I always get ahead of myself because I love talking about these things, so my mind just jumps. That's what my mind is so sporadic. My mind just go boop, 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 boop. But let's go ahead and stay at the matter at hand. Guthrie entered the transfer portal at the beginning of the season. So he didn't even play his sophomore year for Delaware State. He wasn't one of those guys who entered the portal a week ago. He's been waiting to announce his decision, and we've been waiting to hear it. He did a phenomenal job of never really fading, and we're in the midst of football season. Things are going on. North Carolina Central's going. South Carolina State's going. We're talking about the beginning of the year. You got the back end. The SWAC West is going crazy. There's so many times when we could just lose ourselves in football. But I think Guthrie did a good job of making sure we knew, not that it really mattered to us, but he made sure that we knew, I'm still in the portal. I'm still going to announce my decision. All of these things. He never really gave a timetable. It wasn't I'll announce my decision in the middle of the year and now I'm going to move it back. No, he just continued to stay present without ever feeling like he was pestering. He just was present, and I continued to see him. And I thought that was nice. He was a ball hawk, like I said, 4 interceptions, 5 pass deflections. He was one of the best players in the MEAC, one of, if probably not the best defender on Delaware State as a freshman. He was a top 50 prospect for the Senior Bowl as far as HBCU players go exclusively. This guy is somebody who comes in with a lot of decoration. He's somebody who comes in with a lot of praise and a lot of expectations to be a impact player kind of immediately for Jackson State. People expect, because he did that for Delaware State, that he'll come over to JSU and do the same thing. And that's something that I'll definitely be looking at. And I wonder, and I'll be honest. No, I'm going to save that. Ooh, I'm going to say that. I know y'all probably hate now. You know what? I hate when people do that. I reached out to Guthrie, and we should have him on the show Friday. So I'm not going to hint at it and take it back. No, I'm going to tell you guys. So we should have Esaias Guthrie on the show on Friday. I'm excited for that interview. As long as nothing changes, that will be the Friday episode. So look forward to that. Another guy who is staying in his Delaware State connected is Sy'veon Wilkerson. And he does a pretty good job of kind of just keeping some continuity. And this is something we talked about when TC was first hired, the roster continuity. It hasn't been there in the way that I expected it to be there, but I do think that Wilkerson was an important piece, whether it's a lot of continuity or just a little bit. We're not sure how Taylor's going to run his offense. He doesn't even know who his quarterback's going to be. So I think he would like to air it out, but it might depend on how his quarterback situation looks in the spring or in the fall, depending on when guys get there. So these are things that are going to be important. But at the same time, you got Sy'veon Wilkerson to balance it out. It was a point of emphasis to run the ball last year anyway. There was a reason for that. And now you come back the next season, you want to be able to bring back that running back. You want to be able to bring back the all SWAC running back, the guy who was one of the 2 best running backs in the conference last year and really steadied your offense. That's going to be important. Now, I don't want to just say it's continuity. The dude's a freaking monster. Like, the dude had a lot of talent coming into Jackson State, and he lived up to it in his first season. That's going to be important. Continuity or no continuity, getting a player or retaining a player of Wilkerson's caliber is going to be important. And then the other guys that I'm about to mention, they're all new to the FCS level. One's a JUCO transfer. The other 2 are high school prospects. And I'll start off with Tristen Sion. And Sion, for me, is a guy who I started seeing him more and more when early signing day rolled around. Like, when early signing day rolled around, that's when I started seeing Tristan's name a lot more. And he announced his decision. He's kind of similar to Guthrie. Hyped up decisions, defensive backs, and then also just seems really committed to recruiting after they're announcing their intent, right? Those are 2 ways that there are 3 ways they are very similar. Now, Guthrie is a safety. We know he's a safety. With Tristen Sion, we have a little bit more questions because he plays corner, he plays safety. They have that versatility where they can really use him either way. You might see these 2 players in the back end together, but at the same time, you can tell he plays safety when he plays corner and he has to come up for contact. He doesn't shy away from the hit. The way he tackles, you can tell this man is a safety. But I just wonder where he's going to be at Jackson State, and that'll be a fun game to watch. And he, like I said, this is early signing day, and he's a signee, so he'll be there during spring ball. Right. And now you look at 2 players who won't be there during spring ball because they're just commits. I didn't see signing next to their name, but they're committed. And unless something changes, they'll be at Jackson State in the fall. And you have Preston Hatter and you have Phillip Short. Short is out of Holmes Community College in Mississippi, and he was an all-conference player. And you look at Hatter, who in his junior year won a state championship. In his senior year, he changed schools and was a district MVP in the highest level of Texas football, right? So these are 2 decorated players who are coming in to try to fill a void left by Shedeur Sanders. Not to mention you have guys on the roster who are also looking to fill the void left by Sanders. We'll see which of these players are able to do it, but they should definitely be a part of the conversation. I'm not going to say it's a one-on-one battle, but it should be 2 players who jump in the conversation quick. And if Hatter doesn't win the job, he's a freshman. You can redshirt him, and that's easy, right? So it's just that simple. And going forward, I'll talk about why it's important with all of this talent coming in, why this was a pivotal moment for Jackson State to make sure they hit big during early signing day. Before I get into that, however, today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And I'll tell you guys, for all my small business owners, this is the place to be, right? Christmas just ended, but that doesn't mean it's over. It doesn't mean that the heat is over, the rush is over. Let's go ahead and get these guys in. And not everybody works in commerce. Not everybody works in retail, right? So even if you aren't in retail, you are going to need qualified candidates for your job. This is year round, not just a temporary job, not just seasonal. This is a year round thing that you need to be using LinkedIn, because they're going to have people who are qualified and let you know they're qualified before you ever have to talk to them. So you don't even have to waste your time figuring it out. So often we talk to people and like, they don't even measure up to what we thought or what we needed. Take that stress out with LinkedIn. And if you need a job, make sure you put your resume and put all your qualifications on LinkedIn so people know to reach out to you. It's really that simple. You use the purple hashtag #HiringFrame, and it's free. It's free. That's right. No money. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. As we keep on rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure you're checking out Peter Bukowski on Locked on Sports Today, breaking down all of the national stories with the local experts. And I hope you guys enjoyed the little 2022 recap that we had on yesterday's episode. I thought it was pretty fun and a nice way to kind of wind down the end of the year. It was pretty good, right? I think I might even do my own HBCU exclusive year-end recap. I don't know when I'll do it though. Maybe Thursday. Maybe I'll do an extra episode on Saturday or something. I don't know, but it'll be very interesting to see. I might even open up the year and just say looking back at 2022 and looking forward to 2023. Who knows, right? We'll definitely see how we do it, and I'll think about it as the week goes on, right? I got a little bit of time to think about it. It's only Tuesday. I got some time to think about that. But I want to talk about why Jackson State is so important. Jackson State's recruiting class is so important because a lot of schools had good recruiting classes. A lot of them did. But this was one of the most important, if not the most important. And that's because of where Jackson State stood going into early signing day. And I know some people don't want to hear that, but let's be completely honest and be completely transparent, at least from my perspective. Respect my perspective, right? You know, I ain't gonna knock y'all. Jackson State had question marks. TC Taylor is a question mark. You know, I like TC, and I think the guys are rallying around him. But it was a question mark. We don't know what he's going to be like as a head coach. It's not Deion Sanders, and a lot of people are looking like, okay, forget that. A lot of players are strongly connected to the guy who recruited them, whether that's Deion Sanders or whoever. A lot of players are connected to the guy who recruited them, and a lot will go with them. A lot of that will sway a person's decision. It just so happens to be magnified because we're talking about Deion Sanders. But this happens all across the country. You recruiting somebody, they leave towards the end of your recruitment. I don't know if I really want to go to that school. That's the person I had a connection to, you know? So with Jackson State, you're sitting at a situation where you need to establish a little bit of steadiness. You need to make sure the appeal of the J is still there. And these are things we kind of touched on at the beginning of last segment. But perception and reality are extremely close. Right. So I'm saying this for the Jackson State fans who tell me, you know, there's only 5 players who enter the transfer portal or in the portal transfer. I don't know. I don't know where they got this number 5 from. I was so confused. I've seen 2 people say it. One said it directly to me and one just said it on a tweet. It feels like more than 5. It felt like more than 5. So I decided to go do my research. On 3 says 15 players entered the transfer portal. Maybe they were saying that only 5 actually transferred thus far. I don't know. Niles Gaddy just had entered the transfer portal and decided to step out. Maybe, right? But here's the thing. It feels like a lot. And this is where I get back to my point that I was making before I started saying why I was going to make it. Perception and reality, they're very important. The perception and the reality aren't all the way separate, right? Because you look at, yes, the reality is what it is, but your perception can really impact that. How people feel, if they feel like, oh, y'all ain't got it together. You might feel like we got it together, but if you don't feel like you got it together, people might not want to come to the school. And now that begins to impact and that begins to affect the reality. So perception is very important. And the perception is that Jackson State was losing a lot of people. And who knows if I'm conflating entering the transfer portal and entering the draft. But there seemed to be a lot of talent from 2022 that was either in the portal and was questioning whether they're going to come back or in the draft and deciding not to come back. It really doesn't matter which way it was. It's about the departure. Don't matter which way. You can take the back roads. You can take the highway. As long as you get to your destination, you got to your destination. And that's kind of what it felt like. So you needed to kind of steady the boat. And I feel like this was a great recruiting class to do that. You got Esaias Guthrie, one of the biggest HBCU transfers out, and he had been teasing that decision all year long. The hype was there. You got Tristen Sion. You looking at a guy who's a 4-star recruit, 3-star in some, right? But we're gonna roll with the 4-star because he's been 4 in a couple of publications. You're looking at retaining Sy'veon Wilkerson. Those are all important moves. I'm not even sure which one is the most important. I kind of lean towards Sion because this is a player who, first off, does steady the boat because he is a high-ranking high school recruit. But then also, he shows the appeal of the J is still there. And that was something that a lot of people were going to question. People questioned with Deion Sanders leaving if that J was still going to roll over and mean the same, right? Because you have a lot more eyes when it's Deion Sanders. You get the number 1 recruit in the nation. You get a guy like Kevin Coleman. And they want to know if there was going to be some residual left over, if it was going to be a start-stop with him or it was going to be a start and we continue. And it looks like it's continuing. This is only early signing day. If we're talking about rolling over, this momentum should carry you into the spring as well. So these are all going to be important moments to build up to the fall season because first off, you got your running back staying, you got a high-ranking safety out of high school or defensive back out of high school, and you got arguably the biggest HBCU transfer of this period. Those are all important. You have steadied the ship. You have steadied the boat, and that was the key moment of early signing day. You need to make sure that you did not look weak. You actually look pretty strong. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even say so far, I wouldn't even say you didn't look weak, right? That's non-committal. You look strong. And strength is going to show itself in National Signing Day in the spring. So that's why I thought it was very important. Good timing, and you executed. You did everything you needed to do at a moment when you needed to do it. And going forward, we're going to be talking about Texas Southern. A lot of people aren't putting a ton of eyes on them. I'll tell you right now, we got a couple of players out there at TSU who are some receiving threats who I think are going to be very pivotal to the offense next year, and we'll break them down as we continue with Locked on HBCU. First, today's episode is brought to you by NHTSA, and this is the message, guys. There's really no excuse to drive under the influence. And I know a lot of people have heard me talk about driving under the influence of alcohol, but driving under the influence of drugs is right there too. A lot of people think, oh, I'm just high. I'm not impaired. No, you are. You completely are impaired. And you need to make sure that you have a ride. There's really no excuse, guys. Oh, I've done it before, or I never hurt nobody, or I got home safe. Don't do it. Don't do it, man. I'm telling you right now, it is not worth it. You can hurt yourself. You can hurt somebody else, right? And I know a lot of people think, oh, I can get arrested. I can get my license taken. Man, that's a blessing. In a situation like this, that's a blessing. So let's just go ahead and stay safe. Let's go ahead and keep everybody on the road safe, including yourself, so that you can stay living, you can keep breathing. Let's not drink and drive, man. Drive sober or get pulled over. That's wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU. I'm going to the alma mater. I'm going to Texas Southern, baby. And I have two receiving threats who I believe are going to be impact players or have the ability to be impact players as a freshman, and it's very important. They highlight the early signing day class for TSU. TSU listed 8 players in their recruiting class from the December segment, right? Because remember, you still have National Signing Day. So you might see some small classes. You might not see 15, 20 people all the time, but it's just the early period. It's just the early portion. So not everybody's going to be an early enrollee. But I look at 2 receiving threats, both from the high school ranks, right? I think they might only had 1, maybe 2 actual transfers coming in from the early segment for TSU. So it wasn't many. They really did focus on going the high school route, and 2 of the 3 players I'm going to highlight are high school players. The last guy is a defensive lineman who is a transfer from Nicholls State, who I will touch on just kind of briefly. But I think it's important to add some more weapons for Andrew Body in this offense. I really do. And I think Texas Southern has shown itself ready to take that next step, but you have to take it. Right? There's a lot of teams who have shown themselves to be ready for that next step. Not all of them actually went the next year and took it. If they want to, I think adding weapons for Body is going to be important. They did add 2 quarterbacks, and one's a freshman who I think is going to likely redshirt. But you also, you want to put some quarterbacks in the room. But Body is the guy. Like, I have no doubt that Body is the guy for Texas Southern. And if you're looking at what they do, the mesh point is extremely important for Texas Southern. Whether that's running, whether that's throwing, all of these things, you got to have the mesh. Because when you have an effective running game in the way that they do, you also going to want some players who you can just kind of throw it out too short. You can throw it too quick. Maybe you're at the mesh and you have an RPO type of offense where you can throw it to the wide receiver, because we saw the same thing. That cornerback was a little bit off. We're going to go ahead and throw it quickly to this shifty receiver that we just got out of channel view. I think that these are aspects of the offense that can grow. And the offense can get even better in that aspect. So let's go ahead and break down, because we talked about the usefulness of these players and the RPO. And they have different styles, and you'll hear how they have different styles. And I actually think they complement each other. But let's get into the players. First off, out of channel view, that shifty guy that I was talking about, you have Marques Neal, right? So when you look at Neal, he's a defensive back by TSU. That's what they have him listed at. Rivals has him as a wide receiver. 24/7 has him as an athlete. And I kind of think that athlete, or Rivals has him athlete, and 24/7 has him a wide receiver. That athlete is probably the most applicable title to him. That's probably the most applicable. But I want to see him as a wide receiver. I think that's where he can make the quickest and most impact on this team in 2023. That's what I want to see out of him. When I look at Neal, I look at a player who, he's a good cornerback. I take nothing from him. But focusing on that wide receiver position, he's also a kick returner, which gives him one of his biggest strengths as a receiver, and it's 3 of them. 1, he has the ability in space to take over, right? You give him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, he can take off, right? Because he's a kick returner. He understands how to operate in space. He understands how to read his blocks. So a jailbreak screen, that ain't nothing. That's a heavy part of his offense. Quick, let him run. Get the ball in his hand and let him do what he does. Get out the way, right? It's kind of like, I look at screens with players like that as ISO in basketball. Get in the ball and let him do what he do. Get out the way. Unless you're a blocker, get in the way of somebody else. But then you also have the long speed. And he has the ability to burn you downfield, and you see that repeatedly. And those are both helped by his kick returner ability. You see it, or both kind of shown in his kick returner, however you want to phrase it. But then lastly, he has the ability to high point the ball, and that's important for a guy who's only 5'10". Neal's not a huge receiver. He's only 5'10", but he also knows how to get up and get to the high point. He's not just burning people and just, all right, it's dropping in my breadbasket every time. Sometimes he burns people and he looks back and he has to go up for the ball. And he has to fight at the point of attack. So when you look at Neal, he's a guy who you give him the ball in space, let him do what he does on a screen situation. You want him downfield, he can do that as well. So he can stretch the field. He can be a guy who you just get the ball to in space. But then also when he is downfield or when he has a contested catch, he knows how to high point at the attack point. He knows how to take the ball away, right? 50-50 balls feel like 75-25s when you're talking about Neal. Now you have another guy who's coming in who I also like, Roriyon Richardson. Roriyon Richardson. That double R kind of switched me up. But Richardson is a player who he doesn't play like that. He's good after the catch as well, but it's more of a route, put the foot in the ground, explode out. It's different styles. They operate in different parts of the field, right? So you see Robinson, or man, that R's kicked my butt. And I wrote it down as Robinson the first time, and that's why it slipped or messing me up. But Richardson, he's a player who he operates in kind of that intermediate to short. When I'm seeing Neal, I see either behind the line of scrimmage, deep down the field, or we in the red zone. It's like, okay, you headed to the end zone. But for the most part, it's kind of a deeper shot, shorter shot, intermediate for Richardson. That is something that, to me, is going to complement well because you can get both of them on the field. I just want some more talent for Andrew Body. I think they're ready. I've seen somebody say he's ready to be the best quarterback in the SWAC, and we will definitely see. Jeremy Moose has something to say about that, but I think Andrew Body has something to say about what his third year is going to look like as well, right? We're going to see, but those are going to be important pieces. And then lastly, you're coming in with Elenis Noel the third, a defensive lineman out of Nicholls State. That's going to be important. And going into the National Signing Day, I think that defensive line, and that's the only reason I mentioned him, because he's a defensive lineman. This should be an important part of Texas Southern's recruiting. It has to be. It has to be an important part of his recruiting because they're recruiting because you can't get gouged at in a running game like you did against Prairie View. You have to get more disruptive, right? You just don't have many disruptive defensive linemen, and D. Anderson just left, so that number dwindled down even more. So whether that's Noel, who has to be a part of the solution, he cannot be the solution. I know you want him to tap into his potential, but he is not the solution. He has to be part of the solution. And whether it's him and a group of other people, you have to make sure that that defensive line is better than last year. And I highlight these three players because all of them could have an impact on Texas Southern not being ready to take that next step. They're already ready for it, but actually taking it. And going forward on tomorrow's episode, we're going to be breaking down more signing day news, more recruiting day. We're going to be talking about that for the next couple of days during this week. So go ahead and get ready because I am excited about it. Until next time we hear each other, guys, go ahead and make sure you're checking into Locked On Sports Today with Peter Bukowski, wherever you get your podcast. And in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.